I'm chasing something to add value to humanity. The danger today is that we've been taught that we're limitless.
How do you think that we have stripped men of ambition?
Power is incredibly seductive. He learned every day to suffer. Let people grow up. That's my issue. Grow up.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford, and we are joined today with the incredible Christie Dishner.
Yeah, we are.
You cannot see her. She's off camera, but she is here with us today.
She is.
You can feel her power.
We are in the presence of greatness today. You know what I mean? But we're in the presence of greatness every week. Lauren's here. We're in the presence of greatness every week. So it's just like double greatness today. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think so too.
So it's good.
So before we jump into it, what's something you've been wrestling with lately?
What I've been wrestling with lately? No, 15 things. No, I think probably the biggest thing I've been wrestling with is what opportunities to say yes to and staying focused on them. I think a lot of times what ends up happening is that it's not the lack of opportunity. It's always just what opportunity do you pay attention to? Because I love new things. So every idea seems great, looks great, and I feel like I could help in a lot of different areas. And so trying to realize, like, where do I actually spend my time and really lock in there? So that's kind of been the thing I've been wrestling with and trying to figure out what's the grid that I look through in that, and so on and so forth.
How do you decide that?
I think one, like seasons of time, or season that I'm in right now. I think we are in a season of really, like, I think there's some momentum. And so it's just kind of, I think, things that can get the greatest traction, momentum. I also think that it's the idea of playing chess. It's looking at opportunities that 5 or 10 years from now will, even though there may be an investment on the front end that may not, bring initial financial or influence, whatever, but knowing 5 or 10 years, you're making a bet that it's going to do that. So looking at that. And then I think the other thing too is just, I spend a lot of time like actually praying and just kind of, going in, evaluating internally, like, why do I want to do this? That's usually the big part too for me, is why do I want to do it? Because sometimes, is it because, my parts of me wants to, is it because I'm trying, if I do this, it proves to whoever that I've finally made it or whatever. So I always have to go through that grid as well to make sure it's not that.
What answer are you looking for?
I think the answer I'm looking for in these moments is just like, what am I responsible for taking care of right now? And when I go underneath the hood of it, it's just, what season of life am I in? And I think that anything right now for me, I really do believe it's like supposed to create a momentum and things like that. But I think it's a lot of stuff that's like behind the scenes, like in the shadows of things. You know what I mean? I think in due time, there's just a lot of things that I'm a part of right now that I'm able to have influence with, but not a lot of people know I ever have influence with it. And actually, I'm starting to, like, even though it's hard for me, because I've talked a lot about like wanting to, the idea of being known and things like that because of things from my childhood. But actually what I'm realizing is that at this point in time in life where I'm at, it's that when you're in the shadows, for lack of a better word, is that when you're in the shadows, like, it's you can move a lot freer and you can get things done. And I think that's my biggest thing. It's like, can I actually move the needle in this area? If I can't move the needle, like really make momentum, then I don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that ties really great into the topic that we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk a little bit about ambition and energy management. And this was sparked after you had a conversation with one of your mentors. So can you tell us a little bit about that conversation?
Yeah, one of my mentors, Kevin York, he told me one time, he was like, if I were the devil and I showed up to you, he was like, it wouldn't be money. It wouldn't be power and influence. It wouldn't be women. It wouldn't be alcohol, drugs, whatever. He was like, it'd be opportunity. If I were the devil and I was going to figure a way to get you out of the game, he's like, it would be opportunity. He was like, because what will happen is that you will chase, because of ability, you'll chase all these things and you have the ability to impact all those things. But what you'll do is just chase, and the things that you're really supposed to focus on, you won't do it. And so you'll have little bits of impact places, but not the deeper level impact that you actually are supposed to have.
Why do you think that he said that specifically to you?
Because he's known me for a long time, and I think he appreciates the giftedness I have in certain areas, but I also think out of a real care, because this thing about why I always say you need to have older people in your life, because older people who really care for you, they have nothing to gain by telling you the truth. You know what I mean? Like they aren't, the only thing they have to gain is your well-being versus sometimes people, who maybe your same age, younger, somebody who could have certain things of envy, jealous, whatever, they could give you advice that's not really from a pure place. But when you have older people, and plus they know you, and here's the other thing, they've been through stuff themselves. And so they know how to look ahead, and he's been relatively, really successful at what he does. And so whenever that happens, I think he just has a deep care for me. So I think that's why he said it.
Yeah, the idea that opportunity would be what distracts you from accomplishing what it is that you need to do. How does that relate to ambition to you?
There's good ambition. I think I think it's okay to be ambitious, but I think you have to check what's the motive of your ambition. Because I think there's good ambition, bad ambition. I think bad ambition is fueled by usually shame, fear, broken parts of your past, kind of desires that are unchecked. I think that's where bad ambition comes in. Ambition to have power for the sake of maybe you were powerless, now have power, and what ends up happening there, then you take power in a bad way. I think good ambition is when the motives are actually, I'm chasing something to add value to humanity. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's kind of where ambition kind of sits. And I think that's how it pushes forward.
Yeah. You mentioned this a little bit, but culturally there is a little bit of a narrative right now that ambition is evil. Where do you think that idea has been birthed from?
I think it's been birthed from, we've seen power, because I think we have impact. We have access to a lot of stuff now, and information we never had before because of the internet and social media. But I think that people see it in a bad way because they've seen people run after, get things. And so I think it's twofold. I think people seen power and people who are ambitious, kind of run over people. I think people seen the negative sides of it. Sometimes people from ambition, they've seen families go sideways. They've seen people lose their way. I also think it's people in today's world that no one wants to be uncomfortable. No one really wants to be challenged. So when you see somebody who's ambitious chasing something, it makes you have to look yourself in the mirror. And what we tend to do, instead of realizing oh, that's their race, or man, let that motivate me, what we tend to do is tear them down to try to bring somebody on a level to justify why we don't actually work hard or why we don't chase things. Because a lot of times people don't chase things because they're afraid they're going to fail. And so what they do is they justify by saying they're balanced. So they justify by saying they are, this is just kind of, I just want to manage where I'm at right now. I'm happy with where I'm at right now. And a lot of times when you talk to them, though, they're not. And so I think we just do that. I think it's come on both sides. I think we've seen the abuse of ambition and the burnout. And, we see people chasing things to where they're addicted to Adderall. They're microdosing things to be able to push, kind of a lot of that Silicon Valley, a lot of the business kind of, finance world, you see a lot of those things. So we've seen the negative of that. But I think on the other side of it, I just think people are complacent sometimes and they want to pull people down to their level.
Mm-hmm. If ambition itself isn't the issue, what do you believe is the problem?
I think it's the motive. I think it's why you do it. I think motives it's really the fuel underneath everything. And I think if you don't understand the motive, it's like the wind blowing. Just imagine you have wind. You're on I don't know. I've never been on a sailboat before, but just what I've told, if you get on a sailboat or something like that.
That's probably what you should do when you go on vacation with your white friends every year.
Go on a sailboat? Yeah. Definitely not. Last time I checked, when I see sailboat movies, it's it's they take you out to the middle of the sea and somebody ends up dying out there. So I'm good. But a sailboat, the wind takes you somewhere. And if you don't know, if you're not directly understanding where the wind's blowing, you can't guide the boat where it needs to go. And I think that's what motives, intentions are in ambition. It's the wind that's blowing. And what happens, I think people start off with ambition, it's good, but they don't realize what's the motive blowing them there. And eventually, if it comes from a broken place, that's never going to be satisfied by getting to some destination. You have to do the deeper work there because the wind will blow you down to a place. And next thing you know, you wonder how somebody got to that place, how somebody who started off with good intentions, right, ends up there. How somebody started off with good intentions, or it seems like good intentions, ends up there. It's because they didn't understand deep underneath what was the motive of why they were doing it.
Can you share a story about a time where you have lived ambitiously, but it's been driven by validation?
Yeah, I've got a lot of them. So let me just try to pull one.
Flip through the Rolodex.
Yeah, no.
Well, I think something that could be useful is the broader narrative we've kind of talked about this on here in a different episode before, is how you ended up in the hospital 2 years ago.
Yeah. I think it was because what I was doing is my ambition to be a really good leader. What was motivating that, I think sometimes, was the approval of people. So I would take on responsibility for other people. Like, my ambition was to be a good leader, but also what was fueling that, I wanted to be accepted. So I would take on responsibility for other people. That was not my responsibility. And after a while, what began to happen was that your body can only take so much, because that's where burnout happens. Where I hit burnout was the fact that I was emotionally taking responsibility. I didn't know where I ended and the next person began. And so in that, I would say, oh, it's because I'm a sacrificial leader, and leaders lead first and leaders do this. And what I was doing, I didn't want people to have to make tough decisions, because I'm like, if I'm making them make a tough decision, how they're going to view me. So at times, instead of having that person, no, this is the person directly reports to you, you should deal with it. Or, hey, if you got to fire that person, you should do it. I would do it, because what I did, I justified it. Because why? The leader, you're the one. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and you want to be the example. You want to be the one stepping out, taking the bullet for your team, not your team. But what I realized, it wasn't about me taking a bullet for our team. It was about me wanting to be accepted by everyone and approval. So I did those things. And so eventually, when you lead out of that, it eventually has wear and tear into it. It really completely rewired, like, my body and, my internal and stuff like that.
I think it's interesting that you can even have a noble pursuit, or a pursuit that is viewed as more noble than maybe getting money or making impact. Like you were saying, your pursuit was, I want to become a better leader, and yet you still found yourself in that place.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we do. We're very critical today of people. It's easy to look at, like, say, even right now, in the White House, it's very easy to look at people like President Trump and Elon Musk and people like David Sachs and just have like this negative view of who they are. And we think that these are, and again, rightfully so. I mean, these are guys who are kind of oligarchs, and they're going after what they're doing. But here's the other thing too. But then we'll look at other people who maybe have said different things, but they were the same way. You know what I mean? And I'm using and again, I'm whatever, like a Nancy Pelosi, or you saw again, you saw with President Obama. I mean, everybody was the same. It's just that there's like the way they would talk seems more noble, versus when you're looking at the guys right now in the White House, they're just letting everybody know, like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Everybody else has been doing this. Mm-hmm. They just are saying it. And I think that's and it can look like the other people were more noble. They weren't. It was all motivated by power, greed, stuff like that.
Yeah. Something else that you said is that we mistake movement for momentum. So just because we're moving doesn't mean that we're growing. Can you share an example of a time where you were doing a lot, but it wasn't necessarily taking you to where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think that, I can think when I was starting the business I was running, my first one, Game Speed, which is a basketball academy. It was that I was doing that. I had ministry stuff I was doing, and I felt like I was running in a circle, because I was like going from one thing to the next thing, and it wasn't getting real movement. But I was being very active, had a lot of hours and things like that. And the way that I realized that one day, I was like, because I kept being in the same place, like financially, right? Like we had a little bit of growth, but it was just kind of, but it wasn't like, I'm like, man, we should be better than this, whatever. Until one time I just made a decision. I'm like, nope, every bit of money I make is going to come from this business. And once I decided to do that, it's like the business like literally like 3x'd in like probably about like 6 to 8 months, because I was like, I just dropped my head and I went that way. I think at times what people can do is do a bunch of activity but not be going anywhere, because I think a lot of times activity can make us feel like we're accomplishing something, versus actually you have to have movement. And the thing about movement is that when you have movement, you're accountable, because activity can make you look like you're accomplishing things. But when you have clear goals, that lets you know you're accomplishing things. Because I didn't even have clear goals. I'm like, yes, I want this business to grow. When I put a dollar amount on it, when I put a amount of people there on it, then that's when it begins to grow. And I think that's one of the ways.
How do you feel like you've navigated the tension between knowing when to sprint and knowing when to recover?
I think it's being able to see the signs. And what I mean by that is, and something recently, over the last few years, when I got sick, prior to that, we had launched, doing our consulting firm, and it was kind of like, it was just pretty miraculous, like the level of clients we got. I mean, we went from nothing, you know what I mean? Like it was just an idea and a concept to where, you know, you're pretty quick in six figures and then even almost clipping seven figures. And the thing about it was that that one, you know, then all of a sudden it's like, man, I get sick, but I'm like, we're growing. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. But when I look back on it, it took me almost a year into that to realize that, man, our clients, some clients were just paying us to do stuff and we were still working, but we weren't adding any new ones, but we still were growing because our clients asked us to do more work and whatever. So instead of just settling there, I was like, no, but we got to go. What about this? What about this? And it took me until about probably, a year into it that I started realizing like, man, no, this time was about us doing this work, but also for me to actually get healthy and to get better. And so I think what you have to realize, you have to read the signs. I think sometimes you're going to know, like instead of it being like, man, maybe there's a season where financially, you know, the organization or thing, you know, it's not growing the way you want it to grow. That may be a time for you to it may be a restructuring time. That's what it was for us too. When things started to slow down. And like last year, I started realizing, man, there's going to be a shift that's happening, like a shift happening in consulting. And I started reading the signs, right? So I started, you know, reading, you know, different articles and things like, and people were talking about how consulting firms were literally dropping rapidly, especially like conventional consulting firms. And so I'd already been feeling that. Then since then, seeing all these different signs, we started pivoting what we're doing, you know, now, but we did that like 8 months ago. And so anyway, all that being said, I think that's just part of it. You got to be able to read the signs and knowing, and then there's sometimes the signs are like, man, run. You know, right now, I feel like we are in a place where there's momentum. It's like when the wind's to your back, you run, because you don't always have momentum. But when you do have momentum, you need to run with it.
Yeah. How do you navigate the times where maybe you feel like from a business perspective, you're in sprint, but personally or your family or in your marriage, you're in recovery?
Yeah, that is a great question. And that is a very difficult one to deal with. You know what I mean? I feel like that. I think that's why you have to know what you're supposed to focus on. Because you're right. Not everyone, like in my family, is in a sprint. You know what I'm saying? Like, matter of fact, they're all in different places. So in being a part of helping lead my family, I have to know, like, I may be in a sprint here, but they're not here. So I have to realize what's the most important things I have to do right now from a work standpoint and what we're doing. And then what's the most important things I have to do as a husband, as a father right now to be able to help support like my family. So one thing for me is like, even today as we're here, like my daughter's here, like in the office. Well, some of that is the reality of that. What some of the things she's actually going through is being able to like, man, having proximity. So that may mean when I travel more that one of them are with me. You know what I'm saying? That may mean when I travel more that it's going to be, you know, I have to make sure I'm consistently checking in more and I have room to be able to do that. That's the other part too, is because when you're in a sprint, there's a lot of mental and emotional stuff that's happening inside of you. So you have to do the work and the practices to make sure that you have room to actually be able to handle, because what will happen is that you'll have so much going on at work and so much in the business or whatever you're in your leadership that then you don't have any room emotionally when those who need you the most, actually you can't give it to them. So you actually have to mind that. That goes back to my original thing of burnout, is because when you take on other people's responsibilities that's not yours, it's more room that's being filled on your plate to those who you actually are responsible for to help. You can't help them because you're taking on responsibility for other people.
Yeah, I want to get into burnout a little bit more in a second, but can you also describe what it was like when you felt like the business was in sprint, but your body was starting to fail you in a lot of ways?
It was really difficult because it would just be times where, you know, you finish day and it was just like, I would just be in such like excruciating pain. Like, you know, this past, as we were filming this a week ago, I went to Mayo Clinic. I do it every year. And it was funny as I got up and I was there, you know, you have to get there like 7 a.m. because, you know, you're doing executive physical stuff. And I literally, as I was parking, because, you know, I've done this now 3 or 4 years. And this was the first year I did it where I didn't have all this anxiety, because there's real reasons why. But as I was walking literally in to go, you know, I kind of know, I tell people I'm like a Mayo OG now. I know everywhere to go. I know I got plugs in Mayo, you know what I'm saying? And so when I was walking, all of a sudden, as I'm walking from the garage into the building, it like hit me of how bad I was feeling back then. Mm-hmm. Because it was literally walking from my car to Mayo at time. I mean, when I'll never forget that, like from my heart rate being up to my body just hurt. I mean, it was like hurting to just even walk into there. And then I was walking, I was like, oh, like it was totally fine. I felt good. Like my body felt great when I was walking in there. And that was such a different thing, you know, for me. And so the point was that it was just so painful. You know what I mean? When you're going through it. So you drop your head, you run, you go, you figure it out. But it was a point where I realized, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is sustainable. I mean, there literally was a point in time where like it was hurting so bad. I'm like, yeah, like I think I'm going to die. You know what I mean? Just because of how painful it actually was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, so when that was happening, and then you had to kind of started making that a priority.
Yeah. One of the things that I think we teach people often, not us, but generally the cultural narrative, is that if you're really stressed out, do what you can do to limit your stress rather than learn how to carry more weight and grow in resilience and endurance and the capacity to carry more weight. How have you learned how to sprint faster, longer?
Yeah, I think it's the practices that I actually have to do. I think one of them for me, an important practice for me, is being able to actually communicate. I'm a verbal processor. I can find my way to what's going on. So one of the things I have to do is consistently talk. When I find myself where the slowdown or the struggle happens, and where I stop communicating. And so whether that's through, for me personally, that's through my own prayer time. That is through meeting with, when I hang out and I talk with Dr. Zoda, some of my friends, sometimes me and you talk, whatever, to Wendy as well, that I have to be able to process what's going on. That's a big practice for me to be able to communicate that. I think as well, I think when you have whatever your rhythms are, you have to do that. So if that rhythm's working out, if that rhythm's for you, mindfulness, if that rhythm's for you, man, like you have to go do something like, I don't know, like you have a hobby and I have to do that. You know what I mean? That's another thing for me. Like one thing that really like clears my mind, it helps me, is playing NBA 2K. It's crazy as it sounds. Like it's literally.
And Harry Potter.
Yeah, I'm playing the Harry Potter game. You know what I'm saying? One of the greatest. But
good storyline.
It's an incredible storyline. And so like when you gotta do stuff like that, why is that? Because it's the one place I can go where I don't have to really like, where it's like I can think, but it's like no high pressure. A lot of other stuff I do is high pressure. So like I like to just go do it, and it's like, and it actually brings relief to me. So I think you have to figure out what those practices are, and you have to keep those things in there, because when you are running and you're working 10, 12, 14-hour days, you have to have those moments there. But you also have to realize those aren't going to last forever either. Like, you know what I mean? I think sometimes we fear like, oh man, I'm going to be in this like 14, 16-hour sprint for the rest of my life. No, you won't. But if you're starting something, yeah, you will. And you got to run at it and then know when there's time to slow down, pull back, whatever.
How do you practice gratitude towards your achievements, whether you're in sprint or recovery?
I think it's just being reminded. I think writing it down, and trying to go back and look at it and review it. That's one of the things I'm doing this year, is trying to, in a journal, like when there are like I like to call them like boundary stone moments, to write them down. You know what I mean? Because I think that when you see moments like that, it can remind you, oh yeah, there's like good stuff that we're actually doing, or good stuff that we've like accomplished and things like that.
Let's talk a little bit about how energy is a limited resource. So can you share a little bit about how you view energy management?
Yeah, I view energy management as something, it's like anything. It's like money. It's, it's like the power on your phone, right? You only have so much. And I think the danger today is that we've been taught that we're limitless, right? That, we have access to all these things, but no, there's limits. And I think the same thing comes to energy. I think that what happens is that energy is this thing that we all get energy. And I think it's kind of like, and it really is, it's really like your phone, right? Like if you overcharge your phone, you know what I mean? Wow, it weakens your battery. And so you actually have to charge it the right amount. And so I think practices, things we talk about, that helps charge and restore your energy. But the other thing too, you have to empty yourself too. I think that's one of the problems today. I think people find themselves in tough situations, or they find themselves in habits or patterns because they don't empty themselves. Like you should, I believe that if you're working and if you're married, you're working single, whatever, that, at the end of your day, you should be exhausted. Like it should be when you go to bed, you're like, I cannot wait to go to sleep, because you've literally emptied yourself. You know what I'm saying? It's like using your phone. And it's like, man, I've ran that thing down. It's like, you know what I'm saying?
I was going to say, is your goal to get to 0% every day?
My goal, really, honestly, it depends on like what season I'm in, but like, yeah, honestly, like I try to run it down all the way. and then to try to, but again, when you do your practices, it's not just sleep that brings that back up. Sleep does help, but what you try to do as well is the practices kind of help that as well. So maybe not running it all the way down to zero, but I mean, it's definitely running it to,
maybe a good 1.2%.
I don't know. I just know that, like in my life, the yellow energy saver light comes on, you know what I'm saying? Like how it is on the iPhone. And so, but no, doing that. And I think that's where, in today's world, I think, especially young men, I think that's why we're seeing such a problem with young men today. I just don't think young men, like we've stripped them of the ambition to go chase something. And because of that, we have a bunch of idle young men. And so when you do that, then, we're having crazy conversations like our last podcast of sex robots, you know what I'm saying? Or we're having conversations about like people, getting, I've seen so many of these bros at our gym right now that instead of like chasing something, all they're doing is going and doing like cold plunge and
like there's no reason I should be going to the gym at 12 and there should be like 10 gym bros there in the sauna and cold plunge. I'm like, wait, what are you doing?
That's what I'm saying. And they're like, yeah, man, I'm just in here just trying to practicing mindfulness. For what, Chad? So you go to like freaking Potbellies tonight? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, what are we talking?
Potbellies is a club in Tallahassee.
Yeah, it's like, what are we talking about? Like these dudes be talking, one day, and when they're like trading, they're like getting ready for their DraftKings. They're trying to get their parlay up tonight. I'm like, these dudes are idiots. But anyway, point being, though,
but how do you think that we have, in your words, stripped men of ambition?
It's because we've seen power by men be abused. And so what we did is that in a attempt to expose that, which we should have, we go to extremes. And then it became anytime someone would want to lead, anytime a man would have that, it was like, well, what about women? What about this? I'm like, no, two things can exist at the same time. The empowerment of women and the empowerment of men. They both can exist. And I think what's happening, even in our country right now, where everyone's freaking out about, is because the pendulum has swung. Because what happened was that the pendulum swung a far way, and young men were stripped. And now it was like all of a sudden now to actually try to be a man who, because again, I think men are wired for those things, to go and to move and to build something. And I think what happened was that now that pendulum has swung, now again, you have the rise of Andrew Tate. You have everybody, and again, I don't think Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate are anywhere in the same category, but you have the Joe Rogan bros. Then you have you have guys like Elon. You have all these people of these men, and they're like, yeah, where they're saying, no, it's okay. Go chase something. Go do something. Go. And now it's getting out of hand because these guys are unhinged now, just running and thinking whatever and thinking anything about, women's empowerment. That's all wrong. And it's a ploy of the progressive left. Like, no, men have abused power. I mean, how many more stories do we need to know that men take power and they abuse it? But the point, though, that doesn't mean you still don't empower people. It's just, how do we handle that? And so that's where I think it's gone to. And I mean,
you mentioned a stat. Yes, I think it was yesterday you said it, where it was, what was it, 50% of men?
50% of men 18 to 24 years of age have never asked a woman out in person. And like, that is incredibly troubling, that men they're not put in a position to have the courage to in front of someone actually do that, what that takes. I mean, again, I've been through that where, you ask somebody out and, and it's great. And then you have some where it's a failure and stuff like that. But, back before, I was a Jesus follower, my batting average was really high. So, but no.
I was going to say that was a long time ago,
Wow. Yeah, back in the 1900s, you know what I'm saying? But
back in my day, all the women said yes.
Oh, sure, whatever. But here's the thing. What I would say, though, is that it's now men don't know what failure feels like. So it's easy to hide behind a profile and just DM somebody, you know what I'm saying? Or not to do it at all and just, you know what I'm saying? Or just use an app or whatever. I just think that there's something about that. And I think that is where, but then what's going to happen is then we wonder where leaders are at. And I think what's happening is that we have stripped that. And again, and that doesn't mean in the same breath that we aren't empowering, and we should not empower women to lead. We should. But also, you need to be able to empower young men to lead, because when you don't do that, and you look throughout societal history, young men with nothing to do always ends bad. It always ends bad. If you go study history, and when young men have nothing to do and they've been stripped of things, then you get to see where society's going to go.
What are some examples you're thinking of?
I think of Nazi Germany, that there were a lot of men after World War One, especially in Germany, that didn't have things and needing a vision, and Hitler gave them one. And these young men went full out after it. And, we saw the devastation of that. And so I'm not saying that's where we're at as a country, but what I am trying to say is that it doesn't shock me, the rise of what we're seeing, what I would say, like kind of a little bit more of the over masculine, kind of like the Andrew Tate type of vibe, right? I just think that doesn't shock me of what we're coming out of. And there's a lot of people, again, Andrew Tate's popular because there's a lot of dudes who like agree with that.
Yeah, well, he was cast the vision.
Yes, he cast a vision of something, and it was like, and it was just, but it was so just off and wrong, knowing, because again, if you know anything about him, like, man, one man's like literally running, like, he's imprisoning women and just, horrific type of stuff. And so, like, I just think that we have to begin to give guys a healthy vision of what it could be to lead and to move and to go do stuff and chase stuff, but also realize that you're doing that not for yourself. That's what those guys teach them. Man, I have to go do this for myself to make my mark in life. No, you do that, yes, to make a mark in life, but for the betterment of others. That's the difference. The vision that has to become out there, I think, for men is becoming, no, you need to be heroic, you need to be courageous, you need to be someone who's chasing something for the betterment of other people. And that is what a real, like, I think, real men, real heroes, that they're about out there making society better, not just making themselves better.
How do you feel like you have gone from feeling levels of like helplessness, powerlessness, to believing that you have power, but that the responsibility is to give that power away?
Yeah, I think it's been, again, like I've said over and over, it's a lot of internal work that I've had to do to unravel that, to realize where those messages came from. Was it real? Was it not? But then, because when you start to do it, then you start to realize where you do actually have power. The reality is that I have power in my creativity, in the foresight that I have, power that, we created here in the city we live in Tallahassee. Like, there was no real basketball culture here, and we created that basketball culture to where now we pretty much, like, we control what that culture looks like in a good, and and I realize it's not controlling the culture for us, it's controlling the culture to make it better, to help young men, young women actually be able to grow and develop as human beings and leaders, and then those who have an opportunity to play basketball at a certain level or whatever, helping empower them to do that. And so I realized I have power there. I realized I have power in some of the things that I'm doing now, that we're doing in consulting, power that we're having through helping develop authentic leaders. I've had to realize where was power. I think every human being has power. I just think we have a view of what power looks like, and we think it's a position or a title. But, like, here's the truth about it, and I won't get into who it is or whatever, but right now, one of the most powerful people in all of, like, this whole thing of it in the U.S., of everybody freaking out about what's happening with President Trump in the White House, the most powerful person is someone not a lot of people actually know, and that's the way he wants it. He's in the people. Some people know him, but he's in the shadows. And the truth about it, he's the one. He's the one who puts the vice president in the position he's in, so on and so forth. So here's the point: he has power, but he sees power not as he has to have the position or I have to sit in that seat. He knows the greatest power he can have is being the person who does put these people in the seats, and then being able to control it from there. And so I think it's how you have to look at power in a different way.
So as you started to grow in the belief that you have power, if your starting point is that you feel powerless, power starts becoming your precious.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like you put yourself in the position every day to, like, I'm going to give this way, I'm going to give this way, I'm going to give this way?
I'm reminded of the stories. That's why I study history. I'm reminded of stories. It never ends well. When you hoard power, it never ends well. It always ends in death, destruction, abuse. It's without fail. And that's the one thing that I do. I like looking at patterns, and that's the way I survived in life. I would look at things and be like, is that good? Is that not good? Okay, that's not good, even though people may say this is good, but I don't want to end up there. You know what I mean? That's what kept me away from, for example, like drinking coming up, because I actually, unfortunately, saw, being around athletics, my dad being a coach, and family stuff, to where I saw what the abuse of alcohol, what that can do. So I looked at that, even though my friends were doing it, I looked at that and was like, nope, that's not going to end well, so I'm not going to do it. And so I think that's the same thing when it comes to power. So I'm constantly reminding myself of where that story goes, and that power has really been meant to give away. And here's the other thing too, what I also realized too, is that when you give power away, like, it becomes an endless supply of it. because you're just constant, because I believe you can be trusted with it. Power, giving away power, it attracts more power. And then you just keep it being this flowing thing out. And it's a constant fight to have to do it, because power is incredibly seductive. Power is so that you can start having it to a place where I can move and manipulate things or whatever. I mean, like, that's a very, like, that's a dangerous place, but it's also a very seductive place to be, to where I can live, especially when you felt like you've been powerless. Now I'm like, oh, I can do this. And then here's another one. Someone hurts you. Like, I mean, I had to wrestle with this recently. A situation that's going on of someone who's intentionally hurting someone that I know. I have enough power and influence now that I could literally fundamentally dismantle this person's life if I wanted to. But I cannot use the power and resources I have to do that, because it would feel good for like 5 seconds. But in the end, that would create patterns in me that eventually you just start doing it all the time. And then that does end up being a really, really bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Even though we floated a little bit away from the original topic, I do think this conversation is important. This is going to sound like an even harder left. But yesterday we saw this video of Build-A-Bear.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I would love for you to share your opinion on it. I think the listeners would enjoy.
So yesterday, Christie shows us, so I blame her. Christie shows this video of the company Build-A-Bear. And all of a sudden, it's like it's on their Instagram, and it's like a cougar Build-A-Bear with like the seductive music.
Well, they're launching this 18 plus collection.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like an 18
yes,
plus.
It's like an exclusive 18 plus collection.
And so here's the problem.
So many issues.
Yeah. So that's
with
the problem.
The marketing of that, but
the problem with this whole thing is that it's people not growing up, and it ends up being like, you look at our society. Men are staying in their homes longer than they've ever stayed in their homes. People are waiting later in their lives. You know what I'm saying? To start families, to do whatever. It's all this delayed thing. So now it doesn't shock me that a children's brand and company is saying, hey, and I know what their mindset is. Oh, well, these people were with us when we started, so now they're going to, of course, want a Build-A-Bear. You're like, yeah, maybe, but do you want like the cougar
if
mom?
If a man ever
that's what I'm saying.
gifted me that bear.
Yeah, that one bear.
I would call the police on him.
What was that one bear? It's
the cougar bear and the zaddy bear.
The zaddy bear with it. And I'm like, first of all, let me just tell you this right now. If there was a man who showed up to any of my daughters or any of you guys with a zaddy bear, like I don't know if they would find him. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, because here's the first thing. I'm calling the FBI. I'm like, yeah, we need somebody on your watch list right now. I think anybody who goes and buys one of those bears instantly should be put on some type of terrorist or some type of watch list. They need to be on the watch list if you buy those type of bears. It's insane. And Build-A-Bear, listen, the Trump administration right now, y'all need to listen. Forget Doge and everything like that. We need to leverage some of this power right now to go toward Build-A-Bear right now. Y'all need to listen. If anybody in the administration is listening to me, y'all need to go.
They're talking about no mask. Let's just go ahead and add to it.
Yes, add to it. Yeah, go shut down.
Build-A-Bear.
Go shut down this little 18-year-old Build-A-Bear thing. I mean, because let me tell you this. Well, here's the other thing. You can use that Build-A-Bear thing for sting operations if you want to, because anybody's got them. I guarantee you show up at their house, there's stuff that shouldn't be on their computer or something like that. So I'm judgmental. I don't care. It's dumb. Gosh, like, let people grow up. That's my issue. Grow up. Like, life grows up. I think we're all trying to hold on to things that we don't want to face reality. That's why everybody wants to live as long as we can and everything like that. Listen, part of life is endings. It happens. And I think so many times now we want to keep this utopian world of being young and things like that. And so we live in a very immature society. And that this product is just one of the things that's a part of an immature society.
It's so interesting because you can see the parallels of Ready Player One.
Yes.
And the immaturity that you see play out throughout the movie starting to show up in culture right now.
No, it is. And it'll be more and more. That's why, because people will be underdeveloped. That is why in all of what we said.
Underdeveloped where?
Underdeveloped emotionally. I think underdeveloped. I think people, emotionally. I think people get underdeveloped intellectually. I think they get underdeveloped, like, the idea, like, socially with people.
Yeah, I know that's true.
Yeah, it is. I think today one of the most important things that you can do if you want to So I'm going to give you the cheat and hack code for being someone who will literally, you could be used and make a lot of impact in your life right now, is if you'll be somebody who literally will just carry weight. If you're willing to just carry weight, go through hard things, work through those hard things, and move forward, you're going to be somebody so far ahead, because most people are avoiding difficult things. Most people are avoiding having to walk through things. If you can do that versus in your work you do, and then also do the emotional work, 5 or 10 years from now, because there's going to be such a lack of that in society, you'll be able to do that. That's one of the things I'm teaching my children and working so hard with them on, is do difficult things. Why my son played basketball, it had nothing to do, I could care less if he played basketball or not. But the one thing it did, he learned every day to suffer. Just nonstop. Playing college basketball now. He's a preferred walk-on. Doesn't get into too many games, but he goes through all the practices, does all the stuff, does everything. And you know what he has to do? Suffer. Knowing that even then, he may not get in the game. And the truth about it, it is building something inside of him that that later in life, he really will know. He will know what it means. Hardship won't be foreign to him. And so if that's the thing I would tell people right now, do difficult things. If you do it, you're going to grow, you're going to mature, and in that maturity, you'll be of use later in your life.
I think one of the most powerful things or clips that we've seen is when Jensen Hung was the founder of NVIDIA. He was talking to Stanford students,
Yep.
And he looked them dead in their face and was like,
I wish you suffering. He's
Yeah.
like, if I could wish anything upon you, I wish you suffering. And I was like this, and I have it literally clipped in like my favorites. It's one of the
I watch it once a week.
And it's one of the most beautiful things anyone said, because you know he's
and
in
he
that.
tells them that it's because they're used to getting what they want.
Yes. And he's like, you're in this, and again, and that's what I love, because he's in this tech utopia out there to where everyone thinks like, you know, just I'm going to start the next whatever and go from there. And he was like, yeah, man, it's been 20, and that's what I love about what they're doing. It's been 20 or 30 years of him building a company. And then all of a sudden they kept building. And they were always a good company. But when NVIDIA took that jump is when they just kept working, building. He loves the work that he does. And then all of a sudden, what he's building, then all the other technology, artificial intelligence, and then people, how are we going to the computers to power those things? They had it. So it's like it feels like in one moment they just blew up. No, that was 30 years worth of work. But it was suffering. You know, you hear a story, times of almost going, you know, putting a product out and literally almost going like bankrupt. And he's like, man, but that builds you, that feeling, that fear. You know what I'm saying? I go back on it when I was sick, and then like them telling me, you could have cancer, you could have this, and all of that stuff, feeling like that. And as well, losing somebody, dying who was so near and dear to me. All of that happened. And though I would never want to go back into it again, I would do it again because of actually who I am now. Because now difficult things that I'm facing that used to be whatever, they don't, because I've been able to see my way through it. I've been helped through it. And so that's just it. You get better by going through hard stuff. Well, guys, I hope today was actually helpful for you. Again, I know we've jumped from thing to thing. We talk about energy management. Next thing you know, we're talking about, you know, politics and government, Build-A-Bear, whatever it is. But what I want to encourage you with more than anything else is the fact of this, is that when you go out, is that it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to go chase things, but to check the motives and intentions of your heart. And here's the thing, when you're chasing these things, if you're going through difficulty, that does not mean it's wrong. It may actually be the thing that's going to mold and shape you to be the person that you need to be in the future. Until next time, keep writing new rules.